part 3 of um, 1 Corinthians 7. And so the second video, at the end, I talked about verse 25 through 27, and how Paul is saying here, if you do not have a wife, do not seek to get married. And if you have a wife, and I kind of went through, kind of explained that, and we got to a point where I said maybe perhaps Paul is saying here, if you're struggling with sexual sin, you should get married. However, and go back to where I said Paul likes to make a point and then circle back around to that point. In verse 2 and verse 3, he's making a point, and then in verse 25 through 27, he's circling back around to that point, saying, yes, in verses 2 and 3, because you're struggling with sexual sin, you should get married, and get married to the opposite sex, right? However, I'm circling back telling you, let's not rush things. You shouldn't rush marriage. You shouldn't rush marriage. And a lot of people can just take things out of context, because they read, oh, if you have a wife, do not seek to end your marriage, or if you do not have a wife, do not seek to get married. Well, you can easily take that out of context and be like, well, I guess I am single, so I guess I shouldn't get married. Like, no, that's taking it out of context. Paul is making a point early on in 1 Corinthians, and then he's circling back to it, saying, suggestion, yes, I said you should get married. Suggestion here, because of everything that's going on, because of these sexual sins, and maybe perhaps there is, now, yes, there is young people that do get married and end up having a successful marriage. So I'm not here to say that every young person that gets married, but maybe perhaps that is also, something like a very wise thing is to, if you are to, well, at any age, the relationship that you get with from the opposite gender, you should just be wise and use wisdom, understanding, all of that, and kind of take your time. And maybe you should be picky. Not picky in the way where you're like, well, if this person doesn't do X, Y, and Z, they're cut. Because, well, there might be reasons why they don't. For instance, if you're saying, well, if they don't pray at night, they're cut from that. Well, what if that person just never thought about praying at night before? therefore, what I'm saying is, if you marry a person that doesn't pray at night, maybe perhaps you can teach them how to pray at night. So that's not really a big thing here. And a lot of people think that, oh, I need to get married to a godly person. Yes. But then they make expectations of what that godly person looks like. And a good example is, well, a godly person, they pray at night. Well, that's not necessarily what we are talking about when we say get married to a godly person. We're just saying be wise. And so what is a godly person? A godly person knows how to go low, right? A godly person knows how, and here, I'm not going to say a whole lot on this because I made videos about it. You can go back and find those videos if you're wondering what I'm talking about. But it's simply, he's saying, let's just use wisdom and let's be careful about who we get married to. And because, again, we can look back at Ecclesiastes 4:9, and we can also look back at Genesis chapter 2, verse 18. And so, again, reminder, Ecclesiastes verse 4:9 says 2 people are better off than 1. And so, yes, that often stands for like friends. It can also mean relationship, like a spouse. And so oftentimes we like to be like have multiple friends, because friends can help us pray, right? They can help us pray through the hard times. They are there when we need them. But see, a wife or a spouse from the opposite gender is better than a friend, because sometimes friends aren't always there. And, well, sometimes friends don't always give the best advice either. And your spouse is going to have your heart at their best interest, or you at their best interest, right? Like a spouse really is going to care about you, and they're going to be around more than a friend can be, right? And so, because sometimes you might text a friend and it might take days before you get a response, or you might try to call a friend and they don't answer, right? Or sometimes you try to call or text and they're busy, right? Or whatever. And so that's where we get to Genesis chapter 2, where the reason why God gives Adam a wife is so that she can help him through those difficult times. Not just because he was lonely. He was lonely, and he needed somebody to fulfill that loneliness, but he also knew that he would need help. And so, yes, friends can help with the spiritual warfare, but a spouse can do that, maybe a little bit better than that. So we see that Paul's just asking us to use wisdom and to be careful.